วัสดีครับสวัสดีครับสวัสดีครับสวัสดีแขกผู้มีเกียรติแล้วก็สื่อมวลชนทุกท่านนะครับขอต้อนรับทุกท่านเข้าสู่งาน MOTIF Presents TOM DIXON'S 48 Hours in Bangkok ผมสะทนตันตราพรนะครับรับหน้าที่ดำเนินรายการในวันนี้ครับผมก่อนอื่นนะครับขออนุญาต1เรื่องนะครับตามกฎของ PDPA นะครับวันนี้เราจะมีการบันทึกภาพแล้วก็มีการบันทึกเสียงเพื่อที่ทาง MOTIF เองจะได้นำบรรยากาศอบอุ่นเช่นนี้แล้วก็บรรยากาศพิเศษแบบวันนี้เนี่ยนะครับไปประชาสัมพันธ์ต่อในอนาคตฉะนั้นขออนุญาตเรื่องนี้ไปด้วยส่วนเรื่องที่2ครับขออนุญาตปิดสัญญาณโทรศัพท์มือถือหรือว่าอย่างน้อยที่สุดก็ปิดโหมดเสียงนะครับเพื่อที่จะไม่เป็นการรบกวนผู้ชมท่านอื่นๆเพราะว่าเราอยู่ในโรงภาพยนตร์ครับผมวันนี้นะครับถือเป็นโอกาสพิเศษมากๆเพราะว่าแบรนด์ MOTIF ตัวแทนผู้นำเข้าอย่างเป็นทางการแห่งเดียวในประเทศไทยของแบรนด์ TOM DIXON ตลอด13ปีที่ผ่านมานะครับรวมถึงชุมชนนักออกแบบแล้วก็ผู้ที่สนใจเรื่องงานดีไซน์ในประเทศไทยจะได้มีโอกาสต้อนรับบุคคลสำคัญคนหนึ่งของงานออกแบบอุตสาหกรรมออกแบบระดับโลกนะครับมิสเตอร์ทอมดิกสันศิลปินชื่อดังที่ประเทศไทยกรุงเทพมหานครในงานทอล์กกึ่ง Presentation สไตล์เข้มข้นนะครับซึ่งมิสเตอร์ทอมดิกสันจะขึ้นมาเล่าเรื่องราวต่างๆด้วยตัวของเขาเองนะครับเรื่องราวจะมีอะไรบ้างจะครอบคลุมถึงเรื่องของจุดเริ่มต้นของเขาจะพูดถึงเรื่องของรายละเอียดถึงแรงบันดาลใจแนวคิดแล้วก็แน่นอนว่าเชื่อว่าจะต้องมีชิ้นเด็ดชิ้นหนึ่งฮะซึ่งส่วนตัวของตัวเป็นเองแล้วเป็นคนที่สนใจชิ้นนี้มากๆก็คือโคมไฟที่ชื่อว่า Melt นะครับซึ่งเป็น Best Seller ชิ้นหนึ่งที่ MOTIF นะครับฉะนั้นวันนี้เราจะมาได้ดูกันว่าผลงานออกแบบที่ประสบความสำเร็จเป็น Best Seller มาตั้งแต่ปี 2015 คือ 10 ปีเต็มๆนะครับเป็นงานออกแบบร่วมกันระหว่าง TOM DIXON กับ Front กลุ่มนักออกแบบของสวีเดนนั้นจะมีเรื่องราวอะไรซ่อนอยู่ข้างในได้บ้างเพื่อไม่ให้เป็นการเสียเวลานะครับขอเชิญแขกคนพิเศษของเราในครั้งนี้ครับผม Please give a warm and huge round of applause to welcome the one and only the marvelous Mr. Tom Dixon
Okay. Hi, I don't know what you said, but I have half an hour and 100 slides to show you, so I'm going to go really quickly. There's some seats in the middle there for people standing up. Yeah. And I'm going to tell you some stories about where I came from, how I became a designer, what I do now, what I'm doing with MOTIF, and maybe a bit about the future. So here we go. I didn't really want to be a designer. I had no idea about design when I was a kid. I had no ambitions, but I loved drawing. And I think it's probably when I was 16 that I discovered clay and the ability to transform something ugly, a material that's ugly and cold, into a shape which is at least desirable, right? So this influenced me a lot, but like a lot of other children of my generation, we grew up in a time when there was punk in the UK. So this is music business, and there's something kind of interesting about the way that music at the time, you didn't have to have a skill or a certificate, you didn't have to learn an instrument, you could sing really badly but still be number one in the hit parade. So that's what we learned from the punks. I was never a punk. At the time when I was growing up, it was very tribal in the UK. It was glam rock, it was rock and roll, it was skinheads, it was new romantics, and there was a lot of influence from music, even in the fashion as well. So of course, I was more interested in music than I was in design. And this is me, age 17, as a bass guitarist in a disco band. So I had a music career for maybe 2 years after leaving school. But it was really a motorbike accident that stopped my career in music and gave me the opportunity to do nothing for a while. But at the time I had a collection of old motorcycles and old cars. And what I learnt from that was welding. So welding is a very interesting technique which allows you to make structures very quickly and very strong as well. I think if you do ceramics or if you do woodwork, you have to plan your object, and if you make a mistake, you can't go backwards. Whereas with metalwork, if you make a mistake, you can just remake it again. Now, I think I knew from the music business that I could make things without having studied how to make them, without having permission to make them. And you'll see from my early works that they were pretty ugly, right? So I think there's something about being in London at the time which allowed you to make things that were completely personal. Now, this is a dangerous chair. It's rusty. It's unattractive. It's not comfortable. But the unique thing about it was only me doing this kind of work in London at the time. And I think in the modern world, it's harder and harder to be unique. So you can see that I wasn't very good at design. I wasn't very good at metalwork. But it was really through practice that I became good. So I start making things mainly from found objects. So the material is free. The technique is very fast. So I can go through many, many variations to discover my own style. So here you see I moved from found objects to objects from a kitchen shop. Here you'll recognize, the frying pan from a cooking shop, the ladle from a Chinese kitchen shop, bicycle forks from a bicycle. And so these are all objects that give me a sense of form and proportion, and I incorporate into the work. Like I was saying, what's kind of great about doing things on your own and doing things in metal is that nobody's telling you what not to do. When I visit art schools, often there's a lot of criticism, there's a very specific brief, and you have to produce according to what the teacher asks you. Here you can see I was completely free to make stuff in whatever shape out of found materials. And for me, what was important as well from not going to art school was the idea of alchemy. I was able to turn rubbish into gold very quickly. So immediately I was starting to sell things. So I became interested in that idea that I could become a designer because people were prepared to buy things from me. So literally turning rubbish into gold, just like alchemy. So you can see my welding improved and the shape making improved really through a lot of practice. And maybe I made 100 chairs in the first year or two, which again would be impossible to do if I was doing it in a formal, in a job or in education. You can see my welding gets a lot better and the shapes start taking on a decorative form really from the structure as much as anything. I'm still using reclaimed materials a lot, and you can see here, again, some pieces here, the steering wheel from a Volkswagen car, and this, the rubber inner tube from a tire. And so these chairs start becoming a lot more sculptural, a lot softer in their lines, but still made out of rubbish material, so free material, and not at all commercial. Nobody wants to buy a rubber chair made from a recycled rubber tire, particularly if you have white trousers. It's not very practical, and smells of rubber as well. But the shapes were getting more elegant, and the structures were getting more solid, and they were becoming a bit more comfortable. In the UK at the time, nobody was really interested in design, but that chair became a bit more commercial when I started using more conventional materials or softer materials on that shape. We had no design museum, we had no design publications in the UK at the time, and it was really when I discovered, or that rather the Italians discovered me, that I was able to have a commercial success. And so the chair that I was making before in rubber, very punk, I'd say, and then after that, much softer and more craft way, became successful really through international exposure through the luxury Italian brands, in this case, Cappellini. So I learned a lot from the Italians about the value of design into industry. Now, after a while, I had a shop. I had maybe 15 people working in a factory, making metalwork, and it was time really to get a proper job. So my first real job was at a company called Habitat that used to exist, I think, in next door. And I worked at Habitat, which was owned by IKEA, so the biggest furniture company in the world, for 10 years as a creative director. So I'd gone from making things myself on my own with a small factory to working for the biggest furniture company in the world. And that's really where I learned about branding. I learned how to employ other designers. I learned about creative direction. And really that was my first encounter with Thailand, was going to Chiang Mai and buying ceramics, designing ceramics for the amazing factories that exist up in Chiang Mai. So that was my first love affair with Thailand. So after 10 years in corporate life, I got bored and I wanted to start my own label. I wanted to start designing again. So I started my own label, which is called Tom Dixon, which is a very useful name to have as a brand because it's easy to pronounce in every language. And I created my own brand, really using the model of fashion in branding rather than design. It's quite unusual for designers to take on their own production, to take on their own marketing, and to take their own collection to the market. Most designers have studios, and they allow distribution brands to do all of the hard work of getting things into production, getting them at the right price. But I wanted to create a universe which was belonging to me, which is why I put my name above the door, and I do what I do now. I think, we do, so in this brand, which is now 22 years old, I think, we do furniture, we do accessories, and we also do even fragrance as well. So we design not just with our eyes, but also with our nose as well. And mainly we do lighting. Lighting is a big component of ours. And I think it's kind of interesting because lighting is the place where people are prepared to take more risks than in other furniture. So I was going to tell you a couple of stories about some of the inspirations behind a couple of our lighting products. And the first one is called Beat. And it's kind of interesting, sometimes your starting point is not the end point at all. So this is really a story of the British Council, which is a government organisation wanting to do a charity project, a not-for-profit project in India and in Nigeria. And they asked me to go to these two countries to work with the street metal workers to try and find new sources of income for people that were really dispossessed. So I went there, and particularly in Jaipur, I saw these amazing craftsmen that were making metal water vessels in a way that they've been making them for maybe 1,000 years. And they're gradually losing their skills, obviously because of the change in kind of industry. So where they used to use these metal pots in the villages to carry water, it's obviously much lighter to use a plastic water pot, much cheaper to buy a plastic water pot. So the skills of the metal workers are vanishing rapidly. So what we did was create this collection of lamps, which are really based a bit on the beautiful shapes of the water pots in India, but just to change the function and still retain some of those very generous shapes that exist in this metalworking technique. And it's been a kind of big success for us. It was one of our first successes, and we made a whole collection around it, made out of this beaten brass. And what was interesting was how quickly replicas started appearing on the market. So we're in a world now where images travel really fast, and people take your ideas and they remake them themselves. So the problem with replicas is a big one. We found online a year ago 800,000 units of these lights at maybe a quarter of the price of the ones that we're selling. So these are not made in India; they're made in China. And as you go into the internet, you find more and more fakes going on, and it's become a big problem for all brands, I think. So we see here, many fake Tom Dixon's. And I'm here to tell you, don't buy these, and I'll explain why. But this aesthetic that we kind of used, which was, I guess, borrowed anyway from the Indian metalworkers, but still made by the Indian metalworkers, became quite universal for a while, even to the point of arriving in the old company at IKEA as a bowl. You'd get a very similar object, but again, repurposed in the other way again. And what was interesting about that is immediately online, you started getting hackers that said, if you want a cheap Tom Dixon lamp, what you should do is go to IKEA, buy a bowl, make a hole in it, and make it into a lamp again. So the bowl or the vase that had become a lamp in my world had become a bowl again in IKEA, and then became a lamp again through the hackers. So it's kind of interesting to see how a product evolves. And this means that you can now not buy the fake Tom Dixon, but make your own Tom Dixon for $18. Not a bad try at making a Tom Dixon lamp. So what's interesting about that is I thought, well, what can we do? Because we're now in a position where our lighting is everywhere at very low cost. And I thought, well, maybe it's time for me to steal from the people that stole from me and make a version of the fake, which I can sell at a lower price as well. So I took the idea and thought, well, okay, one of the reasons why it's a lower price is because it's not made out of brass and it's not handmade. So why don't I make an aluminium version of my own lamp at half the price? So this is what we've got, and you'll see downstairs the results is actually a much better quality aluminium lamp than the fake lamp. And what it's done is to give us a completely new aesthetic, which is no longer a craft aesthetic, but an industrial aesthetic, and will give a whole new life to this lamp at half the price of the other one that we're still selling. So that's the story of Beatlight, which shows that you should never be complacent and never sit still and never be put off by people taking your ideas. Yeah. So you'll see, lighting is a kind of interesting field for us for a variety of reasons. Like I say, I think for me it's the object that really transforms the space, that has to look good when it's on and when it's off. We do a lot of work in shadows and manipulating light in different ways, through glass, through metal, to try and get naturalistic effects. And we've made a lot of these lamps which are quite shiny. But the field is really interesting now, partly because it's transformative in interior design, but also because it's in the middle of an engineering revolution. What's kind of nice about design is when technology moves forward, design can move forward with it. And we've been in an era where we're moving from electrical lighting to electronic lighting, and that just opens up a whole new world to all designers. That's mainly through the LED, which allows you, obviously, to make a whole language of light, which we're only just starting to explore. I mean, in one of these projects, I was fascinated by the LED, but also fascinated by the circuit board, which is the other thing which really powers everything that we use these days. So I wanted to make a series of lights that were really just about the LED and the circuit board, completely naked, without covering it, but just showing off the beauty of the circuit board and the LED. And we put together a whole language of lighting just from two elements, a circle and a square, which allowed us to make a whole alphabet almost of possibilities, where you could make totems, or you could make chandeliers, or you could make wall mountings, all just using the bare circuit board with LEDs on it. And really the idea here is to get to a point where instead of designing just an object, I'm designing a system of illumination, where you can make sculptures and you can make a different type of lighting altogether. So really just to say that we're now in a really incredible time for lighting, where you can reduce the power usage and increase the design possibilities. And one of those kind of technological advantages is also in a lamp that we've made, which is very much the bestseller at MOTIF here in Bangkok, which is called the Melt Light. I just wanted to tell you a bit about the story of the Melt Light. Really to say that the inspiration was more, we used to do a lot of very spherical, very pure lamps like this one on over here. And in the production of these lamps, which has a very high technology metallized coating, we get maybe 5% rejects. And those 5% rejects are crushed to go back to recycling, to be made into new lamps. And I kind of loved the crushed ones more than I loved the round ones after a while. And I wanted to try and work out whether we could actually sell the crushed ones in their raw state. But so this is how they send them off for recycling. And you can see how beautiful the random shapes are in the crushed lamp. And I tried many times to get this object to illuminate, and amused myself a lot with these huge packs of recycled polycarbonate. And I failed. But one day in the factory, we found a misshapen mold of a white lamp, and what we did was to metallize it. And what happened immediately with this very high-tech metallization, which is only 1 or 2 microns thick, where you can see through the metal, and it makes a mirror on the other side, a technology which is used in spaceflight and on sunglasses and optical equipment just generally, is that suddenly there appeared this amazing pattern, which is very different to any lighting I'd ever seen. So by finding an existing mold and applying a very precise amount of metal on, you suddenly got these most extraordinary effects coming through the lamp. And so that's really a story of melt, which has got this very psychedelic aesthetic, which could be also quite natural as well. So it's got all of these different aspects of being very modern, but also recognizable as maybe water going down a river or marble, the patterns that you see in marble. So everybody sees what they want in this object. And so we've done, pendants, and we've done wall versions. We've done a black version as well, so counterintuitive. You're making less light, but it makes it even more magical. We've done floor versions and big chandelier versions. And we're even now working on portable versions as well. So I think portability will be a big topic as well, where suddenly all of these innovations, not just in LEDs, but also in batteries, have liberated us at work with our laptops, and liberated in the city with scooters. And now we're liberated in lighting as well, where we can move lighting around in a way that was just normal 200 years ago when we had a candle, but now is normal again through the application of technology and the vast improvements in battery and consumption of electricity that LEDs provide. So here you see the full range of the lighting with floor versions and this tiny little portable version as well. And now an even bigger portable version, which we're launching this week, which allows you to really think about this topic of indoor-outdoor and the liberation of lighting from the cord, which has been really around since 150 years now. To be able to take the lamp outside or wherever you want it. And so indoor-outdoor has been a big topic for us, and we're looking at it more and more. Obviously in Thailand, everybody lives indoor-outdoor, but in the UK, this was really a trend that was caused mainly by COVID, where all restaurants had to move outdoors. People started enjoying the outdoors much more than they ever did before because of social distancing. And it's always nice to design in a time where people's habits are changing as well. So this was another little story I wanted to tell you, which is the story of Groove, which we're launching pretty much for the first time here in Bangkok, to really start thinking about, also as a brand, launching things not just in Milan or in London, but wherever it's appropriate. So it's nice to have the first proper display that I've seen in the world in Bangkok, and that this be a launch platform for this new range. So, Groove is a chair which, I've been working on for 10 years. People often ask me what my inspiration is for things, and sometimes it's just a completely different idea, a bit like I said with the beat lamp. And with Groove, what it was an obsession with robots. So, robots are coming to take all of our jobs, and I thought, well, maybe we can use the robots before they use us. And this was 10 years ago. I decided to take an industrial robot to Milan to make a chair. These industrial robots are incredible now. They replace high-cost tooling and allow us to make flexible parts, which are normally seen or not seen in refrigerators, in washing machines, in cars, are all made by these amazing industrial robots. So I got sponsorship from a machine maker called Trumpf, and we took the machine to Milan to a train station and made 200 chairs. So the idea here is to start talking about the complexity of the furniture business, to talk about the future where people will make things in smaller batches, much closer to the customer, where you don't transport chairs all over the world, make them in a cheap place and then take them somewhere else to sell them, but you have a much more flexible means of manufacturing. So of course, I designed the chair to suit the machine, and the chair was kind of quite square and quite uncomfortable, but it kind of proved a point about trying to make a design to suit a technology, right? So we made a whole restaurant in Milan, including these screens and some lighting, and we gave away all of the objects at the end of the fair, and that was kind of a great object, but the chair, frankly, was uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. But I learned a lot about how you rigidize metal with industrial machines, and how by putting a rib inside the metal you can get it to sit flat. So I turned my attention to aluminium. So maybe 5 years later I start all over again, and I start thinking about aluminium, which is a much better metal for outdoors. Obviously it's not a great metal to extract from the ground, but what's amazing is how recyclable aluminium is. And in furniture, you usually use the lowest grade of aluminium. The good quality aluminium goes into food, drinks cans, and into aerospace, and the bad quality recycled aluminium goes into furniture. And I made this chair, which is called the Hydro chair, using a very high-tech method of manufacturing, and really started using the knowledge that I'd gained from the machine to rigidize this very thin sheet of aluminium. So this uses this very expensive mold, and the problem with it was that it was very uncomfortable, and also it was very expensive. So again, I had to scrap this idea and start all over again. So this is the result. So I learned everything about how we rigidize a thin sheet. And what's kind of interesting here is that you see the qualities that you see also in the lighting is that often the structure of the object is the decoration. So here we see this corrugation, which is familiar to you all from corrugated iron that you see on roofs, on shacks and sheds all over the world. And using this kind of undulating surface to rigidize the aluminium, and also to make it very thin and very light as well. So Groove is our new launch here in Bangkok, and it's really just the idea that this very simple manufacturing technique also provides you with free decoration. So, we don't need to add decoration, we don't need to add pattern or even color to this thing for it to look amazing, because just the structure itself will give you the beauty that you need. When you look at this chair, maybe you think of a Japanese garden where they've raked the gravel, or maybe you think of a water drop that's fallen and spread out. But it's a decoration that just comes purely from the idea of rigidizing the metal. And that's where I'm happiest, is when we use structure to provide the decoration. And of course, aluminium is very waterproof, which is a very big thing in outdoor furniture. Just talking a bit about some of the upholstery as well. We do furniture, and I think, I'm somebody that is very impatient. I sit very badly, and you can see that I misuse furniture very much. And this was really the idea that went into a furniture collection that you'll see again downstairs if you're prepared to go downstairs after this talk. And you'll see that it suits my way of sitting, which is unconventional. So here again, I don't want too much decoration. I don't want too much shape. All I'm doing is inflating the comfort parts and inflating also the structural parts to make as simple a chair as I can get away with. So this chair series is called Fat for obvious reasons. We've inflated and fattened the upholstery. And what's kind of nice is how, again, we get this kind of... My microphone. Hello? Okay. And how you can kind of use it as a love seat, or you can use it, you can sit on the backrest, or you can sit sideways on this chair. or back to front on this chair as much as possible. And again, you get your decoration not really from a surface, but just from multiplying the chair. And so here we see Kim Kardashian. I didn't pay her to do this, but modeling her underwear range on this chair. And then you see the latest variant of this chair, which is an office chair called Fat Work, which deals with this problem again that we had in COVID, which was when you took your work chair home, it looked wrong in a domestic environment. So this is, again, trying to make an object which is appropriate for our times, which is a chair that you can work on occasionally, because how we work has changed. You don't need to sit in your chair for 8 hours a day in front of the computer. When you work from home, you go and walk the dog, you go and make a cup of tea, and you're not stuck to the same screen for 8 hours a day. So you don't need all of the ergonomics. So this is taking out all of the complex ergonomics and just doing the most basic office chair that we can. Because the way that we live and work is very different. So when we decided to make a sofa out of the Fat collection, it's the same reflection. Sofas used to be everybody sitting in a line looking at the same focal point, which was first the fireplace, and then eventually was the television. And we don't sit like this anymore. What we sit like is this, so everybody on their own device, you over there on your device, you over there on your device, and you don't sit in a line anymore. You want to do your own thing. You want to do internet shopping. You want to order a Deliveroo. You want to watch a movie, all with a different thing, but you still want to sit together. So sofas that are in the line are a bit redundant. And that's why we kind of created the Fat sofa, which allows you to sit in many different positions and also sit together, but all doing different things, facing different ways. And that, I think, is the more modern way of having a sofa than the conventional sitting in a line sofa. So all I'm saying here is that designers, can only really evolve when society evolves or when technology evolves as well, and then you can have new ideas. Here, another sofa, again, that you can see downstairs is really just the idea of being minimal with a very successful shape. In this case, the Chesterfield, which is a British classic, where we strip out all the decoration, all of the detail, and really just draw a line around it to make a sofa which has all of the ghost and all the memory of a classical sofa, but without any of the detailing. So here we see the plump sofa in action, again a modular sofa, but that allows you to sit in an old-fashioned way, but in a modern kind of aesthetic. So yeah, plump is down there as well. And roughly speaking, that's all I was going to talk about because I have a very short amount of time. This is where we do it in London. It's an amazing building. So if you're ever in London, come and see us here. We're opposite the art school at Central St. Martin's in King's Cross. And, there may be some questions, I think, from you to come back up and ask me. So we finish off with some Thai-specific questions, right? Come up.
ขอเสียงปรบมืออีกครั้งหนึ่งให้กับ Mr. Tom Dixon ครับผม So as he said and as the title of the event suggests, it's design talk. So it's not only just presentation, but it's going to be a talk as well. Just a few questions.
But they need to put the pictures back on just in case.
Well,
I need to refer to them. Yeah.
เดี๋ยวลองเอารูปขึ้นนะครับ
What was the end of the presentation?
Oh, okay. ขออันสุดท้ายครับผม
Yeah.
Okay, that one. Just a few quick questions. Well, you talk about the Tom Dixon, of course, but then you also collaborated with great names, sometimes from different sort of fields, with Adidas or Johnny Walker. What criteria that made you decide to work with someone or say no to someone?
Well, there's, you've got to stay within a world that there's some logic. I think there's too many collaborations just in general, which are more marketing collaborations rather than sincere collaborations which make sense. So the reason to say no is that if you're just sticking your logo on a product and you're not really making a difference to that product. And the good collaborations are always when your skills are complementary to the skills of your partner. So often we get approached, for instance, with collaborations to do lighting because people know we do lighting. And we kind of say no because we want to design and distribute and control the whole experience of that lighting. But there's some parts of lighting, for instance, that we would never do, like technical lighting. We still have a view, but it's a different distribution, different manufacturing skills, and different expertise altogether. So we look for complementary expertise and also collaborations that aren't just like a logo on a product.
Right. And any industry that you haven't been in? You
Oh
know,
my
I mean, like,
God.
do you never collaborated with and dream about to do with them?
Well, you know, that's the beauty of being a designer, isn't it? That actually it's not a thing in itself. It's something that you apply to other professions like journalism, right? So if you want to explore any other world, design is a passport to exploring that. So yeah, there's 100 things that I've never designed. I've never designed a mobile phone, which is the most important device, you know, of the century, right? I've never done more than one building in architecture. I would love to do menswear collection, you know,
Menswear collection.
Transport, anything, you know. So I get bored very easily, and design is the good profession to not get bored, just like journalism is, right?
How? Okay, this is a topic that we actually like save to just talk on the stage. How important when it comes to sustainability to Tom Dixon?
Yeah, well, I think that it's important to everybody. It's not important to me more than anybody else, and I think we all have a bit of a responsibility. You know, the advantage of working in the furniture field is that essentially it's very slow consumption. You know, so you know the thing. You know, we make lamps out of plastic, but plastic is a crime when it's used for one drink of water, right? So you know, as much as possible, we try and breed in longevity into our products. You know, I live with my great-grandmother's writing desk, which she bought as an antique. So it was maybe Louis XVI, so 5 generations before her. So you see here maybe 5, 6, 7, 8 generations of use for one product, and that's something which I aspire to in terms of the products that we make. Is like, can we make them not fashionable? Can we make them of a correct build quality to last a really long time? Can you repair them? You know, which again is not fashionable and impossible to do in technology, but it's totally possible to do in furniture. So it's a subject that I'm increasingly, obviously, interested in and concerned with. And you know, there is a project maybe we'll show at the end that demonstrates some of the ideas that I've got for sustainability in the long term.
Do you think it's a trend?
No, it's essential. You know, I think people get very confused with it. There's a lot of greenwashing, and it's very difficult to do if you're producing products, right? But I think in the end, you know, you need to be very aware of where things are coming from and what happens to them afterwards and how long people use them for. And that's for every brand. And yeah, of course, it's been a trend, but it's got to be baked into everything that everybody does from now on, right? Oh.
You show the share, like the barbed wire share, like from the very early stage of your designing.
Yeah.
But you didn't explain, like, why did you come up with that idea?
I didn't come up with the idea. Well, I don't know. I had some friends, and we learned how to weld, and you know, it was free material, and the free material immediately already had shape. You know, so it was all of the leftovers from Victorian London, the fireplaces and the railings from the street, and all of those things from industry that was being destroyed in the UK, or apartments that were being converted, that just was there for free in the street. So it was the shapes that gave me the idea, right? So it was a shortcut to making other shapes, and I think I could have easily been an artist or a sculptor, but I felt much more comfortable using the excuse of a function as a departure point, right? So it's like, you know what it's like with a blank sheet of paper and you're terrified. But when you are designing for a function, you have, okay, it's a chair, so I know roughly that it's going to have this departure point that you can sit on it. And that made me feel more comfortable. Yeah.
There are lots of young generation and students here, in this room, in this theater with us, any advice when it comes to, attending or aspiring into this industry?
Well, I think, it's sort of what I was talking about at the beginning, is that everything has changed, but everything is the same. So what's changed is the access that people from, young designers from Thailand have to the whole world, right? So when I started, Thailand was mainly known as a place to manufacture or to go on holiday, but now designers in Bangkok or in Chiang Mai have got equal access to a designer in Tokyo or in London to the whole world, right? So it just means that you have to be original to stand out, right? And the difficulty for everybody here is how do you stand out in a really much more crowded place than when I started, right? So it's easier to do, but it's harder because there's more competition. Yeah. So the advice is find your uniqueness, and by being from Thailand, you are very unique. You have an amazing culture, you have an amazing history, and you have amazing craft and industry here. So use it. That's the advice.
Last but not least, the last questions. You have chosen MOTIF. งานในวันนี้นะครับ sorry I'm speaking in Thai งานในวันนี้เกิดขึ้นได้เพราะว่าเรามี MOTIF อยู่เบื้องหลังนะครับซึ่งเป็นผู้จัดจำหน่ายแต่เพียงผู้เดียวมา13ปีกับ Tom Dixon นะครับ You have chosen MOTIF to be your exclusive distributor in Thailand for 13 years. Why MOTIF, and what do you feel about this relationship?
Well, when you do business, or even if you do design, you talk a lot about the products, and you talk a lot about the money, and you talk a lot about where you're going to show. But in the end, people don't talk enough about people, right? My observation, having done business in lots of different forms, is that in the end, you can do contracts, or you can talk about, about strategy or the rest of it. But the important thing is the people, right? So, when you find somebody that wants to represent you, that understands what you're trying to do, that is prepared to take a risk on your thing, then that's the important thing about the relationship with MOTIF, is they've been working on it for 13 years, even though I haven't come to visit them, right? So my visit is very overdue, and it's kind of nice to have people in the country that really believe in what you're doing, right? And that makes all of the difference. So that's the other piece of advice to everybody, is find your tribe, find your people, right? Yeah. And that's all actually. So do we have time for one more little story, which was about sustainability?
Of course, you go.
Or do you want to go downstairs for a drink?
I need one more
Your
question.
choice. Okay, so this was the sustainability story. So this is just like more about the future and thinking about what designers can do to try and make more difference. So, I had this idea, which was for an underwater factory. So I found this technique on the internet, which you must all try the internet one day, you guys, and found this 1970s designer that had decided that we're going to create cities underwater and float them to the surface. So he'd invented a technique which is called biorock, which is where you make a metal framework and you charge it with electricity and you attract all the minerals from the water onto the metal framework. It didn't make a city, but it made an interesting natural cement. So I tried this technique in the Bahamas first, made my metal frameworks and put them underwater and charged them with electricity, and they started making this natural cement and also attracting all kinds of sea life like fish and sponges.
When was it?
This was maybe 8 years ago. So here I am, almost naked, taking a chair out of the sea, and you can see the incrustation of natural cement. And when you pull it out, you get this really quite a large, after maybe 3 or 4 years, you get this very huge accumulation of calcium carbonate, which is the same material as limestone and seashells, right? And so after 4 years, you kind of get this cross-section where the small metal bar, which is maybe 10 millimeters across, has got something like 20 centimeters of natural cement around it. So, not a very practical way of making chairs, right? But what they discovered was that you could put unbroken pieces of coral onto these structures, and they would also grow maybe 4 or 5 times faster than they might in nature because of the electrical charge. For some reason, the electricity encourages the coral to grow faster. So, these are tests that were not done by me, but done in Bali, so it needs tropical waters. So it's something that everybody here can do. And the idea was really to make an underwater factory for chairs, which would have a permanent coral reef on it as well. So these are, this is using AI to try and generate images of the dream, which is that you make an underwater factory, which isn't for furniture, but is just for regenerating coral and regenerating heat-resistant coral. So more recently, I've gone to the Maldives and put in a couple of structures like this, which are intended to test the theory that you can graft heat-resistant coral onto these structures and encourage them to grow again. Yeah.
That's very, very impressive. So if anyone wants to know any story, the event is still going on, but we're gonna move downstairs to the on the 4th floor of the boutique of MOTIF. So thank you very, very much. He has only like 48 hours. This is Mr. Tom Dixon ครับผมมีเวลาเพียงแค่ thank you very much เรามีเวลาเพียงแค่48ชั่วโมงนะครับยังอุตส่าห์จัด presentation ที่เป็น design talk กับเราในวันนี้นะครับยังไงขอเป็นตัวแทนของ MOTIF แล้วก็แบรนด์ Tom Dixon นะครับในการขอบคุณทุกๆท่านที่มาร่วมเป็นส่วนหนึ่งของเราในวันนี้แล้วก็อย่างเคยนะครับอย่างที่บอกไปว่างานของเรายังไม่จบเรายังคงไปต่อกันที่ปาร์ตี้ที่ชั้น4ที่โชว์รูมของ MOTIF นะครับขอเรียนเชิญทุกๆท่านทุกคนเลยนะครับที่ชั้น4ครับผมขอบคุณครับ